what some of our learnings are. A lot of that happened with Ben and Victoria, and I'm newer to the world. But then also to share what, as we've been talking to the team, what's bubbling up about where we want to go next and what we see as potential for the future. Would love to get feedback and hear your interest in some of that, and also to hear what you have on your heart. We're always also interested in feedback from those who have been RHI centers up to this point, and I know there's some people that are just starting the RHI process with us, so there's a mixture of both here. And folks who are interested in becoming RHI center soon, so I know all those things are in the mix. But more importantly, we wanted to share just some more practices with you. This is your retreat, and we want you to be nourished and also to have an experience of some of the things that we do in RHI. So that's a lot of stuff, and I'd rather be more in the practice stuff and the conversation around the practice stuff than too much in the talking at you stuff. Yeah, but I will share a little bit in the beginning, just like Ben did around RCC, because I think it's good to have context and background for those who don't know much about us. So big ups to Victoria Santos and to Ben, who kicked off RHI in 2021. And so my understanding, and it's good that I have Ben and Oren and others here who have been part of that journey longer than I have, is that there were a lot of conversations happening in the early stages of RCC that brought up this concern around needing more capacity and support around racial healing, concern around not having a lot of diversity, wondering what needs to happen internally to bring about the kind of culture shifts needed in retreat centers to talk more about, not just to talk more about diversity, but to actually embody it in not just your participants, but in how you do things, and what kind of culture shift would that create if the inner work is happening. What's that relationship between the inner and the outer? And so, very grateful to our initial funders and supporters, Hamera Foundation, Fetzer Institute, and the biggest chunk of it, Kellogg Foundation, who funded us to do, Kellogg's grant was for 3 years to do these pilots and these retreats with retreat centers across the country in the United States. And so, we've been really into that, and I'm really grateful to the team that we have. Victoria has an uncanny gift for hiring just incredible people, and the team, like, I walked into such a fantabulous team of people who are not just skilled, but who are really good and adaptive and in flow, and have been doing this racial healing work for a very long time, prior to RHI. And then I'm also really grateful to Commonweal, who houses RCC and RHI. And RHI is a partnership with Commonweal Retreat Center Collaboration and the Center for Healing and Liberation, which Victoria founded. Yeah, I think that's kind of big things. And so a lot of what we started with was this desire for healing and transformation, but to strengthen the inner capacity of individuals and retreat centers to do this racial healing work that's systemic, that's working towards all of our collective liberation. I think that all of us have a vision in different ways of the world that we want to see that is accessible to all, loving to all, just for all. And I was sharing a story with Marta when I was down, just as we were walking back up. In 2016, I think I was still at East Bay Meditation Center, but the call went out for spiritual leaders to go out to Standing Rock. Mm-hmm. And I got the big strong message from ancestors, you gotta go, you gotta go, you gotta go. And so I gathered up a lot of donations from people in our community to go. They expected just some people to come, but over 500 clergy and spiritual leaders of different traditions showed up. They were not prepared for that many people, but they were excited about that. And there was a whole walk and meeting on the road with the police, with all the clergy and all the spiritual leaders. But some of the things that people really loved there was just that there was a place for everyone. The elders had counsel around the camp. There were spaces for healers to go and help. Young people and young organizers were doing the trainings and doing the frontline action stuff. The women were leading water ceremony every day. The men were leading the sunrise ceremony every day. So whoever came, you were expected to give of your gifts, and there was a place found for you and so much collective leadership there. And what I was sharing with Marta is there's another elder I know who went, and she knew a lot of young organizers who were there at the same time. And when they were leaving, they began to cry. And she said, "What's going on with you guys?" And they said, "We've been dreaming about, talking about this socially just world that we want to create, where everyone's included, where everyone's honored, and everyone's gifts are there. But this is the first time I've actually experienced it in community, what it feels and looks like. I'm always in people intellectually talking about it, or we're in a fight with someone about it, in a direct action. But I don't want," and they started crying and said, "I don't want to go home because I won't have this when I go home." The sense of belonging and what it looks like and the experience of it. And I feel like that's really true about so much of our conversations about racial justice. That we're often in a headspace, or as has been talked about, that we're, organizations take a DEI certificate course and they check off a box, but we're not kind of going into what would it take internally to actually become that community together. What are the practices we have to take? All the retreat centers you work at are so good at teaching people transformative inner work so they can change their lives. And we have to be doing that work ourselves around the areas that we want to move to, and racial justice is like that. We're not going to build a new world. We're not going to come back into this time of prophecy with the medicine wheel coming back together with the races if we don't do the inner work to actually be able to be together both in joy but also in discomfort. And there's so much ancestral trauma for all of us, no matter what background we come from, that can prevent us from actually staying in a room when we're trying to do this work together. And so I know that the vision that Ben and Victoria and the team had before I came was that this is embodiment work. This is community of practice work. This is getting in our bodies, getting in our discomfort zones work, and building the muscle to stay there. It's like any other muscle. Like when I first go to the gym, I can barely pick up a weight, but if I keep going, I can pick up bigger and bigger barbells. And that muscle is going to get bigger. The same is true around the racial healing work and our capacity to stay in some of the beautiful and difficult conversations that we need to have together, and to build the things that feel like that experience of Standing Rock. I know that we all want that, or we wouldn't be doing the work that we're doing in the world. And it ties into all the RCC values, the power of place and space, the interplay between the inner and the outer work, and the commitment to universal flourishing. I know that we all have that commitment. And I've shared the story with a lot of you, but when Victoria came and asked me, so I'm grateful that Victoria got called into the 3 Black Men thing. I was like so happy for her, and I love Orland and Bayo. I've been friends with them for years, in ceremony with them before. I knew of Resma Manikin's work. So when she got called into the 3 Black Men work, if you don't know about it, I'll have to send you a link. But it was in that time that she said, we have to hire someone to take my place because I have to go do this other work. And she said every time she started working on the job description, Ancestor Spirit would tell her, you have to talk to Brenda. And she said, Brenda's not looking for a job, she's busy. And then she got the message again, and she got the message again, and then she came and had lunch with me. And she said, I know that you're looking for a job, but Spirit's telling me you have to take this job. And I said, you're right, I have kind of like these duties that Spirit and Ancestors in the land have already called me to. So we talked about it a lot, and I said, I have to ask you 2 questions. Is there room for me to be my full Indigenous self in this job? And to talk about the work from a bigger perspective, from a place of Indigenous prophecy, and why this work is important now. Not that it hasn't always been important, but it's really important right now. And is there room for me to help kind of braid the connections between the racial, the ancestral, and the land healing? Because these are not separate for me, and again, it's part of Indigenous prophecy. So I'm going to probably talk about the RHI work in a really, really different way than you are, and I'm still figuring that out, and you're kind of like the first group of people. I think I've talked to individual people about it, but not, this feels really important to me to be talking to you about this right now. I'm gonna start crying. What I said to her was like, you have an incredible program, and if you just need someone to administer a program that's already been created, I'm not your person, I can help you find someone. But I know that I'm gonna take RHI in a different direction because of what spirit and ancestors in the land are calling me to. And is there room for that? She said, yes, of course. And since then I've gotten to meet Ben, who I just adore, and I feel so grateful to be working with him. The team is incredible. We had our first team retreat this spring at Whitby Institute, and that was when I first felt gelled to all of them, because we've just been on Zoom for a couple of months. It was the first time we got to share story with each other, be in ceremony. We walked a labyrinth in the dark, and trusting each other and trusting the darkness. It was so incredible. And everybody led things too. I was kind of loosey-goosey with the agenda, because I wanted everybody to lead things in that meeting, not Brenda leading that meeting, right? So I could see their medicine too, and we just had all these incredible visionary conversations about where we want to go next, and that's my charge right now, is to start fundraising for that vision, and I need to enroll you in that vision too, and hear what you think about that vision and what ideas you have about that vision. Yeah. So I'll share a little bit about prophecy because I feel like it's relevant to this conversation. So a lot of my elders talk about prophecy from the indigenous peoples of South America, called the Eagle Condor prophecy, and many of you probably have heard of it. But a lot of my elders from the Mexica tradition said that in the olden days, before colonization, you were taught that you needed to fly as a balanced human being, and that meant you had to cultivate. Sorry, easily distracted by words and their messages. So the elders would talk about how you have to cultivate your eagle wing and your condor wing to be a good human being. And the eagle wing is more of the intellect and the doing in the world and the accomplishing and the masculine, the yang, whatever phrases you use. And then the condor is more of the feminine, the intuition, the connection with the earth, the compassion, the peace, the connection in this direction. And the oral tradition of this is that 500 years ago, the elders began to say, there's people from other lands who have decimated their own condor people in their own condor medicine and are flying out of balance right now. And they're gonna start to take over the world and spread that imbalance. And many of our ways will have to go underground and be hidden because it will become unsafe to practice. But after 500 years' time, we'll reach a point in the calendar, which is now, where those medicines and ways will have to come back out to help humanity come back into one medicine wheel. One, like all the other kingdoms, all the trees are part of a tree kingdom. They're all a tree family. Like, we're the one that feels broken and fractionated and has forgotten that we're one kingdom. So they said these medicines will have to come back out. And in 1990, Native elders from all over Turtle Island, from North, Central, South, met in South America and started talking about their different prophecies of this time that was coming. And they're very similar, a little bit different, but very similar. This time that was coming, and the medicines needing to come back out for indigenous people to come back into their peace and their dignity, to be able to lead, for people of color to lead in particular ways, those who had gotten less disconnected from the ancestor and the land ways. And so they said, we're gonna have to start laying down the prayer for us and for our peoples, but also for all of humanity. So in 1992, they began running every 4 years. There's an eagle route and a condor route. Runners start from Alaska, and then runners start from Argentina on the eagle and the condor routes. They run for 6 or 7 months, the entire continent. They're stopping with the indigenous communities along the way and taking up staffs with the prayers and intentions for those communities. By the time we get to the middle, there's hundreds and hundreds of staff of all the people. And you're also holding those prayers for the healing of humanity. So that's happened every 4 years since 1992. I have only participated in it in 2012 when my grandmother told me I had to go to Nicaragua and participate and support the indigenous leaders because that was the first year they were doing it. I didn't know that when she told me that. But she said, you have to go down there, you have to fundraise for them, you have to help them. And I contacted the woman who's the leader, and she said, oh, thank goodness. We've been laying down the prayer for the last 4 years that we'd start in Nicaragua to do the run. We haven't done it before. And we laid the prayers when they ran through that we do it in 2012. And she said, and I was at the Sacred Fire saying, I have all the indigenous communities in Nicaragua set up, and they all said yes, and we're going to do this, but we're all poor people, and we're going to have to rent a van. She's like, we have wealth of knowledge, but we don't have money. And we're going to have to rent a van and buy food and get cell phones, and And she said, my grandmother told me at the fire, the message came through, we're sending someone to help you. And I said, I think your grandmother, because my grandmother came in my dreams and said, you have to help these people, and you have to do this for me. I hadn't been in Nicaragua since I was 7 years old, because all my family's up in California now. And so and we both said, I think your grandmother and my grandmother are up there in the ancestor world, scheming and plotting. That was a life-changing time for me, and just the solidification of that, and also just that Nicaragua's in that middle. We're not eagle or condor, we're right smack in the middle, so we call ourselves people that gets off. So there's that piece for me that feels significant. And then my Toltec teacher, I alluded to this yesterday, but in the Toltec calendar we have 6,625-year calendars, or cycles. The time of the fifth sun that's ending is the knife of justice, of war, of patriarchy, of all the isms, of separation from spirit, from ourselves, from the earth in particular, but that very much us versus them duality thing. And that's the time that's ending. And the time that's beginning is the time of the sixth sun, which is the coming into our Quetzalcoatl nature. And that is about remembering that we're a child of the universe and the earth, being able to co-create with the universe and the earth when we're in right relationship with those other non-human energies, that we need to be doing that co-creation with our ancestors from before and the future generations that are calling us to do our work, and that we need to be rooted in our heart in both directions to again be a being who flies in balance. And that in those relationships, when we're cultivating those relationships in good ways, that we can actually create great shift very quickly. So, and I mentioned the hummingbird energy to make the impossible possible. My Toltec healer has healed people from things that the medical industry has said are impossible, because he partners with those energies. I've been asked to clear fibroids and tumors and things in people, using that Toltec medicine. And they go into surgery and the doctor's like, what happened? There were 3 growths there, and there's like, one's completely gone and 2 are really shrunk, So I know all of our ancestors had this medicine in different ways. All of our ancestors had mystic knowledge, but they were in right relationship. I always tell people, I'm not healing anybody. Brenda the human is not doing anything. If I'm not cultivating the relationships with these universal energies, with the ancestors, they're not going to help me. It's not because they don't want to help me, I'm just not in the right relationship, that's all. And so I share all that because coming into the time of the sixth sun is about coming into our Quetzalcoatl nature and remembering who we are. We're divine creatures of the universe, of creator. We're also the children of the earth. And we're supposed to come back into that integration in the heart. And that when we do that, we can be in different kinds of relationship with each other. We can be in different kinds of relationship with the non-human realm, which includes the trees and our ancestors. And from that place, everything is possible. And that we can bring in this time of the sixth sun. All of us are needed. It's an all hands on deck kind of time. Some of the things I appreciate about my teacher is like, don't get fundamentalist about anyone, any of it, because what we call Quetzalcoatl nature is unity consciousness, it's Christ consciousness, it's Buddha nature, it's, so don't get too fundamentalist about it, because there's no conflict between them, this intermystic people. There may be a lot of conflict between the interfaith and intertheologian people, but not so much between the intermystic people, because we're all just dropping in, right? And that's what you're teaching people to do in your retreat centers. And if we can't do that ourselves and with each other, and create the kind of spaces that are truly belonging for everyone, then we're missing this opportunity for humanity to make this evolutionary shift. And so part of being in the discomfort is part of your gift to the next 7 generations. And discomfort is not the same thing as unsafety, although that often gets included. So sharing all that, and also to be patient with ourselves because we are human. The time of the 6th sun is not a light switch. It's like we're in 5th sun and click. You know, the elders teach us that it's this time of gradual shift. And so they started talking to us about this back in the 90s. This time is coming, you gotta prepare. And they were saying, like, you know, in the last couple decades of this 5th sun, you could see the influence of the 6th sun already beginning in the ways that you see mindfulness and yoga spreading all over the globe, mindful leadership, embodied leadership, and emotionally intelligent leadership, which is a lot of circular, more condor way of leading, right? But it's not the dominant way we've been for so long, because that's been repressed. And it's my belief that all traditions have that balance. And it's when particular tradition, and it's also my belief that the teachers who came through with those teachings were mystics who understood that balance and said, whatever I'm doing, you can do too. They weren't about mediating the relationship between you and Creator. But when traditions partnered with empire, they're like, oh, we have to get rid of the mystic and the feminine and the earth-based stuff. One, because we don't understand it. We killed our own kind of people, so we don't understand it anymore. But two, because you can't control people when they have their own relationship with spirit. So there's lots of ways those things got put in monasteries and hidden, and not the lay people thing, right? And this is the time of bringing those things back into balance. And who better than to help hold space for this than retreat centers, right? And to be the places where people experience getting out of the dominant culture and experience being in truly inclusive communities the ways that I experienced at Standing Rock. And how do we need to tool up to actually be able to do that? There's the intention of doing it, and there's the actual embodiment of doing it is very different things. And that's why RHI exists.